Good evening, and welcome to our Counseling Connections podcast. I'm Tinger,
And I'm Stanley Purvis.
and we will be doing our podcast today on hope for the holidays, navigating grief. We're hoping that today you will get some strategies that will help you through the holiday season if you are experiencing grief. And for those that have family members, maybe you will get some tips today that will help you with other family members that may be grieving. So we hope that after today you will feel comfortable in reaching out for help.
And as usual, today we're providing you with real, relevant, and reliable strategies for responsible Christian living today. We know we have various ways of obtaining information, but as usual, we base ours on the Word of God.
So let's get started.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about our feelings, and of course, this is Counselor Connection, and we want to, first of all, acknowledge that our feelings are real. They are very real. Sometimes they don't line up with what others think about us. They don't line up with how others think we should feel, but what we are feeling is real. So we first want to just go ahead and put it out there. Let's just acknowledge what we're feeling. So during the holidays, that's no different. So a lot of times during the holidays, there are a lot of pressures that one will have on them because of the way holidays are traditionally designed. And with that, we want to say, for people who have experienced loss, who are grieving, holidays can be hard without the loved one. And most people will put a stamp on that. But a lot of times they feel like, well, it's the holidays. Let's just smile through it. Let's have fun. But we want to, once again, give you the okay to acknowledge what you're feeling, because not everyone feels the same during the holidays. That's first and foremost. And have honest, realistic expectations for yourself. That's so key, because people tend to want to dictate to you how you should feel during the holidays and how things should go during the holidays. And a lot of times it's based off of traditions. But during this time when there has been the loss of a loved one, it can be very difficult, very challenging for the ones who are going through these gamut of emotions. So have honest, realistic expectations. So, for example, doing things that you have always done, you may say, I just don't think that I can do that this year. I just really don't think I can handle it this year. It's okay. It is okay. And as she said earlier, we want to provide you with some tools on how you can get through this time of year, or these times of year, the holidays, and still be honest with yourself But the expectation, sometimes we see people who are going through the process of grieving and who have lost a loved one, and they have really unrealistic expectations of themselves, as if, they have not lost anyone. And a lot of times it's when they're in the midst of it all that they realize, well, you know what, I just wasn't really honest. I had this feeling, or I really didn't think I could do this. And it's usually in the midst of it all, they just kind of crumble. So we want to give you permission in advance to have these realistic expectations of what you can do and what you can't do during the holidays. Unlike before, you kind of just go with the flow, but things are different now. Things are different for those of you who are grieving. And we want to talk about those floods of emotions. And what I mean by that is, a lot of times floods of emotions can just rise from nowhere. We are going through the process, and especially holidays. Holidays are triggers, because oftentimes those are times when families come together and you really see family and their traditions established, but they can be really challenging for that person who's sitting in the seat of grieving. And we just want you to go ahead and recognize that you may go through a flood of emotions, a gamut of emotions. Those of you who are fortunate enough to see this podcast, you'll see the different faces there, and from smiling to sad to I just don't know what to feel. And that's a good indication of what one who is grieving may go through. But and it can sometimes come in like a flood. And I'm going to talk a little bit in just a second about some ambushes, but it kind of comes, and we've heard people say, I've heard people say, it just overwhelmed them. It seemed like it came out of nowhere. And it could just be a trigger. But once again, you have to have honest expectations. Sometimes some of the things you may have done in the past with the family member who's no longer here might be just a little too much this year for you to handle, especially if their passing has been more recently. So we want to talk about those floods of emotions. So with that, we're going to adapt some of this information from a book called Surviving the Holidays. It's through Grief Share. So a lot of this is going to come from that. And they talked about emotional ambushes. What are you talking about? Emotional ambushes. It's like if in the natural, if somebody comes and they ambush you, it's like it comes out of nowhere. It's like, where did that come from? I was ambushed. Well, the same thing with emotions. Sometimes you could just be doing well, actually in the midst of preparing for your holidays. And it seems like out of nowhere, this gamut of emotion just wells up inside and it triggers something and you become very emotional, very sad. And those emotional ambushes can simply be from holiday dinners. When the family generally gathers together during the holidays, those can be triggers for you that causes an emotional ambush. Things could have been going well. You could have been very busy preparing and things were going well and you just were distracted with getting the meal prepared and family coming in and just kind of fellowshipping. But all of a sudden, you're ambushed with emotions because it wells up inside that your loved one isn't there. Another emotional ambush could be during Christmas time, an ornament. An ornament that you've always put up on the tree, or it could have been special to the person who is no longer here, your loved one who's deceased, and everyone's laughing, decorating, listening to music. All of a sudden, it could be just a simple ornament, and you just have a flood of emotions. And one would say, okay, you're going to be okay, you're going to be okay. But remember, we're giving you permission to acknowledge what you're feeling. It's okay to acknowledge what you're feeling. And we know there are songs, especially in a lot of families that have Christmas songs, or say, oh, I can remember when this person used to really dance to that song or used to really love that song. It could be a Christmas song, and it doesn't always have to be at your home. You could be out and about in your car. It could be shopping in the stores, and this particular song could trigger something. And that's kind of an emotional ambush. You didn't know the song was coming, but all of a sudden you hear the song and then all of those emotions well up inside of you. So we want to just, first of all, give you permission to acknowledge those. And there might be people who don't understand your emotions. They just don't get it. But we know that when you can acknowledge them, then you're a little better able to handle those emotions. Understand your limitations. Even on our best days, we have limitations. So during the holiday, for those who are grieving, you have seemingly like more limitations. But we say understand your eliminations. First, you have to know yourself. When you establish these eliminations, you got to know your family and friends. And it's important that you know who God is in your life. But understanding your limitations. Everyone's not the same. There are some who may feel as if you could do more. There are some who may say, well, you should be doing less at this time. But you know you and your limitations, so understand them. And through understanding your limitations, then you can set realistic expectations for, as I said before, in terms of what you can and can't do during these holidays. And sometimes it may simply feel like you are alone, which is a natural feeling during these times, feeling like nobody understands. Nobody, especially seems like people are just hustling and bustling and going about. And you feel like, no, why is it that I feel like I'm the only one who feels this way? Nobody understands. But I just want to remind you that you're not alone. For in Psalms, coming from the Bible, Psalms 46th chapter, the first verse, I'll be reading from the ESV version, English Standard Version, and it reads, Psalms 46:1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. He is always there. He promised to never leave us nor forsake us, which means even in these difficult emotional times, He is still there. Though we feel what we feel, remember that's real. He is still there. He has promised to never leave us. So wanted to keep us ever mindful that even though we're going through and we're setting these limitations and we're acknowledging our expectations and we're going through these things, He is right there with us. And go ahead and just acknowledge and recognize that the holidays are going to be tough. They're going to be more challenging than they ever were when you are without that loved one. Even though you may have family all around you, that unique relationship that you had with that loved one who's been lost, nobody can replace that. And I don't think anyone would try, but if they do, understand that usually it's with their best interest, with your best interest at heart. Just go ahead and just accept that it's just going to be tough. It's going to be different. That's how you can help guide your expectations. That's how you can go ahead and establish your personal limitations, understanding and giving yourself permission to accept that it's not going to be the same.
Okay, once we acknowledge that there is a difference, there is that pain that is deep down, and how we deal with the pain makes a difference. And the first thing that I have written is numbing the pain is not the solution. When you numb the pain, that is the same as avoiding the pain. That is a coping mechanism that we often use. We just don't want to feel the pain. So we try to numb it. And by doing that, in essence, that is just keeping that pain deep down instead of bringing it to the surface and being able to deal with it. And we tend to try to numb it so that we don't have to deal with it. And that just really makes our healing process even longer. When we're trying to numb the pain, we have to be real intentional about how we feel that void that we now have in our life. And not all the ways that we try to fill the void are negative. Sometimes we tend to take on more tasks at work. We might be overactive, go from one activity to another activity that keeps us from even thinking about the pain. Sometimes we get into relationships that are not healthy, but that just provides us another avenue not to deal with the pain. Sometimes we spend money excessively going shopping for things we don't really have a need for, but it just feels good to be out doing something. And we tend to just overspend. And then there are those negative things that we get into. Some people try to numb the pain by overeating. Some people try to numb the pain by using drugs and alcohol. And you see, I have a picture up there. And that is one of the most common ways that a lot of people use to numb the pain. The problem with that is after a while, the drugs and the alcohol won't have the same effect. So we start to use more and more and more, and we become addicted. And that is not the way to deal with the grief that we're going through, because the grief is still there under all the alcohol, under the drugs, under the overeating. the hurt is still there. So we have to be careful in how we deal with it. So I have a Bible verse up here. It says, keeping away from anything that might take God's place in our heart. And that's what we tend to do when we are numbing. We are filling that void with other things instead of turning to God. In the scripture, Stanley just discussed that He's always there with us. He will never leave us or forsake us. But we have to believe that in our hearts. And He is there to provide that strength that we need to get through. He will send His angels by to help us. But we have to be willing and ready to receive that help.
And I want to add as well, I've talked to people, some older, actually young as well. When I say young, I'm talking like early 20s, and ways that they dealt with, as she said, numbing the pain. And I'm like, okay, let's have. We talked about real talk with you all. I had real talk with them, and I'm like, let's talk about it. So, what purpose did the drug provide? And the drug of choice, one was marijuana, another one was alcohol. What purpose did that drug provide? And so, they're answering, both of them answered basically. It was, one said, so I could not have to deal with the void, and another one said, so I wouldn't have to feel. So I just wouldn't have to feel. When I was in that state, I just didn't feel anything. And so we talked about it, as she was saying earlier. Teacher was saying, it's temporary, and the sad thing is, especially the one with alcohol, very young, it just went from some drinks to try to pass out so you don't feel anything to I become addicted. And we know, of course, God would not have us to even put anything before Him. So when we become addicted to something, it takes that place, that hunger that we should have for God, if we have it for whatever that may be that we're addicted to. So we kind of talked about that, and the young man just acknowledged that the alcohol, he realized that he had to, at this point, felt like he had to have it every morning, as young as he was. And so he realized there was a problem, but it started from simply just not wanting to deal with the day-to-day issues in his home when he was younger. And it just blossomed from that to trying to not feel it, to now becoming addicted. So it's kind of what she was saying. Oftentimes it kind of leads you to a place you don't want to go. But I caution you, as she was saying, those of you who can actually see, some who may be listening, but if you can see, you see on the picture there, various kinds of drugs, and they may seem good for the moment because it just knocked me out and I don't have to feel anything. I'm good. Oh man, I feel good. But when you come down, reality is still there. So this will lead you to a place, as I said, where you will just feel out of control. So we strongly encourage you to grab some tools that she said that are beneficial. And even if it's something like as simple as shopping, there are people called shopaholics. Not, you talked about alcoholics, but then there's where they have literally nothing. They spend everything because they feel like they have to purchase something in order to fill that void. And all of this is about there being a void in your life because your loved one is now deceased. But we want to provide you with strategies today to positively fill them as you go through the holidays.
And I just want to add just a little more to that portion, because a lot of times I know we're focused this episode on grief, the loss of a loved one, but you can also experience that grief even from a relationship, a servant relationship, or, the loss of a pet. But it does not have to necessarily be death. It can be any type of loss. And we see a lot of times another negative behavior that we watch this show Hoarders, and a lot of times that comes out of having a loss, trying to fill that void. So they just continuously accumulate things, and it's difficult for them to part with those things because that now becomes their reality. This is how I feel my void.
Mm-hmm. Good point. It's just we know grief is a huge part of it during the holidays, but and dealing with loved ones. But as she
Mm-hmm.
said, it can be various things that send people into that tailspin of feeling that I'm just lost during the holidays because things are so different. So yes, good point. Good point. Now we talked about strategies, Ginger mentioned tools. So we always want to provide you with some, whenever we have a podcast, with some strategies on how to combat whatever issues we're talking about. And today we're talking about grief. And so we want to give you some strategies. And one that we believe is, in the book further supports it, is we believe is important, is developing a plan. Develop a plan. And you say, you may say, how can I develop a plan at a time like this when things are just so different? It's just hard for me to just get through the day. How can I develop a plan? But having a plan is very beneficial, especially for times like this, because it provides you with the ability for not just to become so overwhelmed, because to do nothing oftentimes results in just being overwhelmed because you don't know. We talked about those emotional ambushes. So it's kind of like that because you just don't ever know what's going to come next, But to have a plan, as we do in life, it makes us better prepared. You know that your life's not the same. So saying don't put pressure on yourself for the holidays because they're not going to be the same as they once were. So it's okay not to put that kind of pressure because your life is different right now. As you said, whatever caused that void in your life, whether it be a relationship that didn't last and you feel like, well, oh my goodness, it's the holidays and I'm by myself, or you've lost a loved one, it is not going to be the same. So it's okay to not have that kind of pressure when developing a plan, because when you develop this plan, you know that its purpose is to help guide you through the holidays. And when we talk about a plan, you're going to see we're not talking about anything as detailed as oftentimes people come up with, who are extremely organized and detailed about the holidays. But we are saying put something in place to help protect you and your emotions, to try to avoid as many of those emotional ambushes as possible. So plan what you're going to do. It'll help you in terms of continuing your traditions or the events you will or you will not attend. This is okay because a lot of times families say you should not be at home. You should not stay at home. You should be here. You should do this. You should do that, like we always did. Remember, you know yourself. So plan what you're going to do. In terms of the traditions, you may know there are certain traditions you may not be ready for right now. There might be triggers. So you may say in your plan, well, I'm going to do this, but no, I don't want to do that this year. I don't want to do that. It's okay. And I'm giving you permission because not everyone understands grief. Not everyone understands grief, but you know you. So by developing this plan of where you may go, what you may attend, what you won't attend, what kind of traditions you may continue this year or not this year, that's totally up to you. Plan how you're going to take care of yourself. That's so important, self-care. Plan how you're going to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you will find not only are you going to be overwhelmed at times, but you're going to be more susceptible to those emotional ambushes. So we're saying plan how you're going to take care of yourself. And if you have children, how are you going to take care of your children? Because the children may not understand the gamut of emotions that you may be going through. They may not understand why things are so different. They may definitely not understand why some of the traditions that you may have decided we're not going to repeat this year, why you're not doing them. But you have to plan how you're going to take care of yourself and your children. But I will ask you this, to please be knowledgeable and cognizant of the fact that they do have a voice. So in trying to develop your plan, if you have children, talk it over with your children. What do we want to do this year? How do we want to carry out through the holidays and still remember whoever the loved one was, or what do we want to do that's going to be different in our home? But please consider your children's voices if they're old enough to have a voice. Want to leave it the scripture: the Lord is trustworthy in all he promises and faithful in all he does. That's from Psalms 145:13. He's faithful and he's trustworthy. I know sometimes in the midst of it all, we feel like, well, I've been forsaken. If this happened to me, how could my loving Father allow me to feel like this and my heart to be so heavy? He is trustworthy. And remember we said earlier, he's there with you. In Psalms 46, he's there with you. So he hasn't forsaken you. He's there to help usher you through this process, this part of your life. But we have control over some things, not everything, but what we do have control over, we can plan these things because we already kind of know what traditions we have. We know how we feel. Therefore, we incorporate, if you have children in the home, what we can do, and then we can try to work through these plans. But I will say, even with the best plan, even in the best of times, we have to be flexible. Even with your best plan, you may say it did not go according to the way we thought it would. Be flexible. If you have to adapt that plan, it's okay. You may have to tell your kids, we're going to try this. If we have to adapt it, it is okay. I encourage you to ask God for guidance in developing this plan. Ask God for guidance. Stay in communication with him through your journals, through your prayers, Bible study. Stay in prayer with God. Stay in prayer with him. Don't leave him. He won't leave you. He certainly has not. But ask him for guidance in how you are to develop this plan that's going to best meet not only your needs, but those who are around you, who truly are part of your inner circle. Now, winging it oftentimes does not end well. This is why we say develop a plan. You can say, well, I'm not going to do anything, because you'll find that if you don't plan, you will have people who really do have your best interest at heart, but they just don't understand your current emotions, what you're going through. And you'll find you're often pulled in different directions to do different things, because a lot of times that's traditionally how holidays are. But if you develop a plan, remember talking about your expectations being realistic, you develop this plan, then you're often able to avoid some of those times when you feel like I have to wing it. Because a lot of times, if you don't do anything, they say, well, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So we want you to have a good holiday. Ideas such as we talked about planning, but with some examples of some planning ideas, such as decorating. Decorating, it doesn't have to mimic everything that you had before. It may be important to you to keep it that way, but you may decide, I just can't handle that this year. So let's do something different. Let's do some decorating different this year. Some planning ideas, in terms of how you're going to decorate. Shopping. You may say this year, I'm just not going to go out and do all of the shopping that I used to do. I'm not going to buy everyone a gift this year. It's okay. Cooking. You may just simply say, let's simplify the meal this year. It could have been an elaborate meal in the past, but this year, let's simplify the meal. And those three ideas are based off of the simple fact that emotionally, you could have been drained, and you just don't have the energy that you have had in the past. So we give you permission not to try to overwhelm. We're talking about being overwhelmed. Overwhelm yourself with trying to go out and do all those things, whether it be decorating, shopping, or cooking, because you just don't have that energy level that you had in the past. So that's a part of planning. And if you feel like it's important, you may want to say, let's establish a new tradition. Let's establish one that will still honor our loved one, but let's do something different than we've ever done before. But this comes in like I said, along with the input from your children, if you have them in the home, of some things you can do. That's a part of the planning. So once you get to this place, whether it be Thanksgiving or Christmas, all of a sudden, it's not like, okay, this came out of nowhere. We can then begin to plan what we're going to do as a family or as an individual. Thank you for watching Counselor's Connection, Real Talk. Tune in next time for part 2 of today's episode.